Hello! I'm Elaine, and I'm a tour guide in the French Quarter. I do ghost tours. And I am not going to tell you the stories that I tell on my tour, because you gotta pay for those. But if you want to hear some interesting things that have happened to me while I'm leading random drunk people around the French Quarter, I got you.
It's time for another collection of random things that happened to me on my tours. So, a couple of nights ago, I was doing the second to last stop of my tour, and a guy in a full business suit looks really snazzy, walking down the middle of the street, stops right behind my group, and starts screaming at me in French. And the funny thing about this is, I had just had a conversation with one of my guests about the fact that I don't speak French. Like, yes, I studied French in high school, but I don't really retain a lot of it. And also, like, if you talk real slow, I can understand some, especially if you're using hand gestures, but I have never met anyone who speaks French and is willing to speak slowly. But also, definitely, I never speak French because I know my accent is god awful and I'd be embarrassed to be heard by a Frenchman. And so this guy shouting at me in French, not actually something I can communicate with. And I sort of like look at him, give him a confused look, a shrug, and go back to what I was doing. And he shouts at me in French again. And like, I heard enough that time to know that I'm pretty sure he said something about because, and I think he said tour. And that bit I know because he said it in English. And I sort of look at him, shrug again, and go back to what I'm doing. And finally, he walks away, shouting in a tone that, like, I don't have to know what he's saying to know he was insulting me. So I just continue with the tour. And at the last stop that night, I feel someone behind me, so I turn to look. And it's the same damn guy. And the fun thing is, he's coming from the same direction, which means he circled around like 3 blocks to come at me from the same angle again. And sure enough, as soon as I make eye contact with him, he starts shouting at me in French. And finally, I just stop and go, Sir, I don't speak French. And he says something else in French, and again, I'm going, I don't speak French. And I'm trying to remember how to say in French, I don't speak French. When finally he switches to perfect, unaccented English to say, Aren't you the tour guide that shouted at me in French earlier? To which I reply, No, I don't speak French. And he says something else in French at me, which I understood one word of, and that was merde. So I know he said shit, and then he turns and walks away. And my guest, who I'd been talking to earlier about the fact I don't speak French, I give him eye contact because why we had mentioned French was he does speak French. And so I was like, what do you say? And the guest is just like, don't worry about it. So I'm guessing he said something rather insulting. But a couple of weeks before that, I was down in Gallatin Street, which is one of those stops almost guaranteed to have something weird happen at it. It is a weird location. And I was just standing there telling the story when suddenly I just stop and get totally distracted because there's a group of gutter punks walking by behind us with their cute puppy who has a toy in his mouth, or what looks like a stick or a toy. But when I gave it a second look, no, it was a random crucifix. This dog was just holding a crucifix like a chew toy in his mouth. And once they're passed by us, I sort of stop and look at my guests and go, Did anybody but me see the dog with the crucifix? And one of my guests offers the suggestion, maybe he was on his way to an exorcism. And I'm like, sure, that's a perfectly normal New Orleans thing to happen. But the third one is one that sort of blew my mind a little bit. So I had a guest the other day that we were at the Joan of Arc statue, which the important thing to know, I talk about the fact that the Joan of Arc parade happens every January 6th. And ever since a certain January 6th, when I say that, a lot of my guests will pull a funny face at me. And this group of guests, most of them did. So I did a little pause and went, yeah, I know, January 6th. It's fine. And I kept talking, finished the story. And afterwards, this guy raised his hand and was like, why were you like confused about the whole January 6th thing? And I was like, I wasn't confused. I was just, referencing that some people have strong feelings about that particular date. And his response was like, why? What do you mean? And I'm like, the January 6th insurrection? And he's like, what? Never heard of it. And I'm like, where are you from? And he says, New York City. And I'm like, and you don't know about the January 6th invasion of the Capitol? He's like, no, but I guess I'll look it up when I get home. And I'm just like, dude, I know there are some people who are checked out of the news, but damn.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and feel free to share your own experiences in the comments below.